A video today on the Landscape Business Course group. I asked for questions, anything that I could help you all with. So got quite a few of those, so I'm going to see how many of those I can just go through as quickly as possible, and I'll just read them through. I haven't actually seen them all yet. I just know I just posted a couple hours ago. So if you're not already on the group, make sure you check it out, Landscape Business Course, just the Facebook group. So get on there and you can ask those questions occasionally when I ask for them. And so I'm gonna go ahead and just jump right in and get through as many of these as I can. I'm gonna be brief on the answers just to save time and try to get through all of them if we can. So I'm gonna start off right from the top. I just posted this a couple hours ago and I'll just go through these questions. So Joseph asks, how do I start working on my business instead of in my business? So Joseph, if you're listening to the podcast, if you read ZeroTurn, the book, that's going to definitely point you in the right direction. Start working on the systems, the procedures. The course helps a lot with that. If you've been to the conference, Pro Plus, that's all we talk about in Pro Plus really is creating systems and systematizing your business. It's what I have done for the past year for Augusta Lawn Care, and am even going even further and deeper in now because I'm really trying to step out day to day. So to do that, to step out of the business completely and really be a silent partner, you really have to create systems and procedures and work on the business, and so that encompasses a lot, and that's really what I talk about in Pro Plus. But if you get the course, the book talks about it, read books, things like that, you can really figure out systems and procedures and every single aspect of your business, like we talk about in the course. Every single aspect of your business should have a system, from hiring to the marketing and tracking the numbers for each of those things, what your customer acquisition cost is, how that funnel works. All of those things should be systematized and have numbers behind it. And so how do you start working on your business instead of in your business? I would just say that you should educate yourself on the systems and procedures to make your business run with or without you. Matt asks, took the words right out of my mouth. James asks, trying to hire my first full-time guy, how do you get yourself in the mindset of going from an employee yourself to more of the management role and stepping back? My biggest problem is I enjoy the work so much, but know that if I want to grow, I have to step away unless needed. Trying to get over the scare of that, building it up and having that person quit, and then I'm in a deeper rut with double the work and no person to help. So James, definitely fear of hiring your first person is not something easy to get over. Once you have a lot of employees, it's not so difficult, but I understand that first person is super integral, super important. I talk about that first person being very important for your trust, and really to make sure it's a good experience for you as an employer, so that you aren't afraid to hire people and you do trust people going forward, and realize that there's going to be people that that abuse that trust and you're disappointed in. At the end of the day, you have to create a business that has enough margin to be able to afford an employee, and I feel like the biggest issue that people have that go from solo and then have a few employees and then retreat back, the biggest problem I find is that they think that because they're making money solo that they can just get employees and make more money, when in reality they need to make a business that is profitable enough to sustain the employees' wages and still make a profit. That's the only way it'll scale. And so the biggest issue I see is people that are charging $30 to $40 an hour, making good money by themselves, but as soon as you add an employee to that with taxes and everything else like that and more overhead, another truck, stuff like that, they just get wiped out and they get burnt out. And so my biggest thing would be make sure you have a business that's profitable enough and you're charging enough hourly to be able to compensate for that. And so I guess that kind of ties into even why a lot of you have asked since my last video about why I'm franchising Augusta, and it's really the biggest reason is to help that solo individual scale that business up to the size they want, and usually that's 5, 6, 7, 8 employees. For most people, that's where they want the size of the business to be, but a lot of people will get to 2, 3, 4 employees and retreat back to 1 because they aren't charging enough. And so by franchising Augusta, we're giving people the website, the forms, the uniforms, the logos, the branding, all of the systems in place, the follow-up automations, all of that sort of thing. We're giving that all to them to make sure they can charge $60+ per hour from the get-go and create a base solid foundation to be able to scale the business and not have to retreat back to becoming solo. So another question, what are the first steps to getting to scaling your business and hiring employees to get bigger jobs? How did you handle that? Did you have previous experience? So this is something that I've talked about, I think I mentioned a couple times recently. If I could change anything in what I've done with Augusta Lawn Care is I wouldn't have added so many services so quickly. I would have waited a while. I would have just focused on mowing, just would have focused on weed control, really basic stuff, cleanups, trimming, and then really just dominated that before I started adding so many other services. We're in the process of cutting services out right now, and we're doing that to make a more scalable model, a more efficient model, a model that every time we go to a job, we know the profitability, we know the numbers just like the back of our hand. Once that job is sold, I know exactly how much we're going to profit on that job before it even is done. And that wasn't always the case even a couple of years ago when we was growing really fast and adding services and adding different types of hardscaping or turf installation, all these tree work. There's so many areas you can go into that I feel like a lot of times when we're just getting started, we'll just take anything for the sake of getting more revenue. And as you kind of hit a point where you actually have to not scale back, like we're still growing in terms of revenue this year big time, but in terms of growing how many services, we're actually taking it back. We're scaling back how many services we do. And so I would recommend don't get too enamored with adding bigger jobs or bigger services. I just talked to one of my local competitors here recently, and he's wanting to get into hardscaping and big projects. And I said, no, I would really recommend trying to figure out the small job first, because if you can't make money on a $40 mow, how do you expect to be able to manage a business on a $40,000 project where you can lose your shirt on it? And so before you get hiring employees and trying to think about bigger jobs, really focus on how do you take yourself doing small mows and make that really good. Then how do you make it where you have employees doing smaller mows and make that really good? Okay, then maybe you start adding some larger properties for mowing and for maintenance. Then maybe you add some commercial properties. Then maybe you get into some cleanups and tree trimming. Maybe then you get into to hardscaping as your business grows. But when I say like that, you should be a 7-figure company before you start thinking about too much diversification. You can be a jack of all trades and do 100 grand in 10 different types of services and not make a single penny on it because you need so much equipment. Your people have to be so incredibly trained and talented, and you have to cross-train them in so many different areas. You have a lot of callbacks. You're never proficient. There's not efficiencies because the guys are doing so many different things. So I'd really focus on getting good at the small, get good at doing those things well, the small business, running your business small, get well oiled there, and then begin to grow that way. Is my opinion. How do I prepare for an economic crash? Have you struggled because of the economy? How did you handle that? So Joseph, I didn't ever live through 2007, 2008 as a landscaping company to my size. I was just doing it on the side still and going through college. So I don't know what it's like to be in an economic crash. So that just being said up front, what's interesting is look around your local competitors, and there's very few of them, I would say less than 10% of them, that actually were landscaping before 2007. And that's because so many people got wiped out during the recession. And so it's something that at the last conference we really dove deep in and talked a lot about, is what's going to happen. I don't know if that's in this next 12 months. Is that 3 years away? Is that during election years? Is that 5 years, 10 years? I have no idea, but it's going to happen eventually. There's going to be a recession, and I hope that 2007, 2008 does not repeat itself for the landscaping industry when so many people got wiped out because their businesses were over leveraged and just a whole myriad of things. But I have not actually lived through it personally, so how I handled that, haven't been able to, I can't comment on that. In terms of how to prepare for that, you can look at certain trends and things that happened in 2007, 2008 and learn from those things. And so we talked a ton about that at the last conference. And it's probably something we'll talk about even a little bit at the next conference in 2020, because it's going to happen. Like I said, don't know if it's a year. 2020 is going to be an interesting year because it's election year and all of that in the U.S. That has political and economic implications, but it could be 5 years away that the next recession hits. When that happens, the 10% of people that make it through in the landscaping industry are the ones that become massive businesses later down the road, because you can actually capitalize on it. So that's what we talked about at the conference. And there's a video or two, I think, on YouTube and Facebook that I posted in the past couple months that kind of were just pieces, snippets of the conference about that exact same topic of the recession and things. What skills do you have or have acquired over the years that helped you in business? Just trying to learn a lot. So when I was going to business school, I would be going to class from 6 p.m. till 10 p.m. And throughout the entire day. At that time I was solo mowing, and so I'd be listening to audiobooks around business the entire day, and then I would go to school from 6 to 10, professors, classes, all of that around business, and then after that I'd do homework until 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. So it was just like soaked in me for learning about that. And so I think becoming a student of business, becoming a student of our industry is really important. Becoming a student of marketing is really imperative, and being able to just be aware enough that we don't know everything, and I'm still learning every single day, is very important in this industry and any business, in my opinion. Carlos asks, how do you prepare to work 100% remote? I will be living abroad. I use Service Autopilot and use automations. Any automations you recommend? So for those of you that know, I use Service Autopilot. I've used Lawn Pro in the past when I was smaller. Both of those products have automations, which basically allows you to send emails and phone calls and make to-dos and emails based upon certain triggers, like when an estimate is sent or when somebody does some sort of action, or you put a tag on them or whatever it is. And so Carlos asked, how do I prepare to work 100% remote? Carlos is part of our Pro Plus group, and I'm moving my business right now towards a place where I'm 100% remote. Not remote because I'm still locally living here, but 100% not involved in the business. And so we're taking steps to that every single day. The next big thing that we're taking steps towards doing that is creating a pay for performance based pay system instead of an hourly system. It's not easy to switch, but it's something that's really important if you're going to create a sustainable, very predictable business model. And so that's something I'm doing. I've also put in place management now that would be able to run the business on a day-to-day basis without me being there. And again, a lot of that isn't really possible until your business is of size and is profitable enough in terms of top line and bottom line revenue to be able to sustain middle management, because they're not cheap and they're usually an overhead expense. So in terms of how do you prepare for it, number one, build a business that's profitable and big enough to sustain middle management, then create the systems and procedures that run the business without you being there, and then create systems in terms of pay structure that incentivize everyone there to make sure the business is healthy, growing, and profitable. Another question, I am 16 years old. What can I do now at my age to build this side hustle into a company? So Joseph, I would, again, learn. I would perhaps go work for another company out of your local market and learn the industry more. Just be absorbent of education, learning everything about this industry, not just the mowing and how to fix mowers, but like the business side of things is really important. George Cortez, hello Mike, love your content. Oh, this one's a long one, I think. Long. Okay, this is a long question. I haven't read it yet, but it's long. Hello Mike, love your content and advice on growing a successful landscape business. You've mentioned a key component of building your landscape business is due to Facebook advertising. What are the demographics you use in Facebook advertising to market to highly qualified homeowners for a massive lead generation funnel, such as income, marriage status, interest, and other to hyper-focus on dominating your local communities? Also, any specific books you recommend? Okay, so I think this is going into a different question. So first of all, in terms of Facebook ads, in Pro Plus, I did our whole first session in February. It was a couple hours long. I went through all 9 Facebook ads that we ran this spring, all of which did fantastic. We had a great customer acquisition cost. We ended up having to turn the ads off because we were so busy, and the staff at the office was just overloaded with leads, and so we ended up stopping the Facebook ads. But there's a variety of different demographics. Obviously for us, 45 and up is a very key market, but then within that we do segmentation and are really not so much interested in income levels and things like that, as much as making sure that when they see the ad, the creative, the text, I want them to say one thing, and that is, that's for me. And so what can I do in the targeting and then mirror that in the text and the image or the video to make sure that they realize I'm addressing them specifically. So whether I specifically say their neighborhood or whether I specifically talk about being a grandparent and I'm able to target them in that way, I want them to be like, oh, that's interesting, that ad's for me because it's talking about being a grandparent and I'm a grandparent, so I target grandparents in Facebook, and then in the text and creative talk to grandparents. So something like that, and in Pro Plus we talk all about that, and I show you the ads. Okay, so George continues on. Also, any specific books you recommend to learn how to build, sustain, and grow funnel for unlimited lead generation? The Ultimate Sales Machine by Chet Holmes is pretty good. It's okay. It's just one I recently read. There's a lot of really good books. But let me keep going here. If I may, how about Instagram and LinkedIn? So in terms of Instagram, you run all those ads through your Facebook Ads Manager, and as long as the video is under 1 minute, you can run that same video ad from Facebook onto Instagram. LinkedIn is something also I'd be interested in if you're especially if you're doing commercial work. That's really interesting because you can target the people that work in maintenance divisions for big companies in your local market. So if you're really into commercial, LinkedIn is a big place, I think, for you. Let's see here. Where was more questions? They seem to be platforms that would do wonderfully in our business if proper lead generation funnels are built. I may stay in my lane and hire a pro to do it, but I want to make sure I know how it's done to make sure it's being created and operating successfully. Too many Facebook ad pros say they're good, but always want to increase advertising budget and their cost for results after a 2 to 3 month period of time on the job. If you have time, how about the content to market and remarket? If you have time, how about the content to market and remarket to highly qualified people to entice them to call you? Thank you and keep crushing it, like Gary Vee would say. Just trying to look here. So in terms of Facebook ads, I would educate yourself and do it yourself instead of hiring someone else, because when it comes to like an ad agency, typically they're going to charge you a fee up front, which is not super bad, but then say you want to spend $20 on Facebook ads, they would then take another $20, like a 50% split. Another $20 would go towards them as the agency just for creating the ad, managing the ad, and all of that. And so I don't really like that, because that means basically my customer acquisition cost is going to double. Now, if they're so good and they can reduce my customer acquisition cost by more than half, and they're taking half for a fee, maybe that's important. But I feel like it's just a vulnerability if you don't, as the business owner, don't know how to do these things. Like if you just spend 8 hours watching Facebook ad videos on like how-tos on YouTube, read a book or two about it, listen to some of the podcasts I've done over the past couple of years on it, like it'll pay huge dividends. So, you know, I truly believe that $5,000 to $10,000 in Facebook ads, I can get someone's entire market to know who they are. Just completely do that. Like I just know that for a fact. I can have people recognizing me on the street if I spend $3,000 to $4,000 on a local, very targeted area. Like it's a powerful tool. I feel you need to know it, and so that's why I actually have not opened up to ever, and I will never take money like an agency would and then make someone's Facebook ads, because I feel it's so important that you do it. Down the road, maybe for big businesses, I'll think about something, but it's just not, I'm not even thinking about it. Right now I'm focused on the franchise, and for them, we would create systems and procedures for Facebook ads that work and convert and run them through that, but it'd be part of the franchise. Like I'm not going to do it for outside people yet, because and that goes into the question, would you do it for me? And it's like, no, not right now, definitely not. The franchisees will get access to everything that I do, and Pro Plus members see how I do everything. And I would just highly encourage you, just educate yourself. I don't care if it's Facebook, LinkedIn, whatever the next thing is, Instagram ads, whatever it is, just educate yourself and spend the time to do it. And if you're not going to, yes, you're gonna have to pay that middleman to to do it for you, because you want to make sure you know what you're doing. You can waste a lot of money otherwise. Jeremy Law. What's your thoughts on scaling primarily a maintenance side business to 7 figures while also working another full-time job as a firefighter? Shift work on the fire department are 24 hours and then 48 off. So Jeremy, I did a video, just search it on YouTube or Facebook, about how to grow your landscaping business on a part-time basis. And so watch that video, but basically I would just really focus on density, so that when you are working on the side, you're making really good money. And I would also use the fire department thing as a marketing tactic as well. Make sure people know about it too, so that there's flexibility in your schedule and things. But I think this again is partly, you know, for the franchising thing that I'm doing, this is the ideal sort of person that is wanting to grow their business on the side, and they need the systems and procedures to sustain that while they're still working their regular job. So yeah, firefighters, teachers, because teachers usually have the summer off. Like, these are really things that I'm really interested in. How do we give these service people an opportunity to have a side business that makes really good money? And so I would really focus on density, Jeremy. Jeremy, I would really focus on density. I would focus on referrals within that market. I would focus on just 3 or 4 services: mowing, weeding, bush trimming, fertilization. Keep it small. Don't get involved in big projects, because you don't have the time to knock out a 2-week job all at once. Just get very focused on that. And then once you have enough work where you're completely solidly busy, either A, jump out of your job, but if you like doing that, it's totally fine. Hire someone and make sure you have the systems in place where they're going to be able to do the work correctly, and make sure that you've built a profitable enough route or business to where they can do that and you still make a profit after their wages. And then that's just how you continue to scale that way. Jenny Lopez Guzman, commercial bids, do's and don'ts. So commercial do's and don'ts. I'm just reading these and responding to them. First thing that popped into my mind when it comes to commercial don'ts is don't get into it too soon. Everyone for some reason thinks commercials like the holy grail right when they start their business. It's not when you're small and new. I'd highly recommend you figure out the smaller properties before you try to get into bigger things. And there's a lot of, you need more manpower typically. So my first don't for commercial is don't get into it too soon. Another don't for commercial would be don't reduce your hourly man labor rate just for the sake of it being commercial. And if you're going to, don't do it by a lot. Don't go from $60 an hour on residential down to $40 simply because it is commercial. Maybe 60 to 50, but I feel like too many people, because it's commercial, they bid way low to get the work because they're usually in competition, and then they end up on these properties where they're doing a ton of work and they're not making any money. Like, if you're not going to make money in this business, why are we, like, this is why we're here, was to make money. And so if you're going to be doing low profit margin work or work that you're losing money on, you should drop that stuff, get rid of it, or figure out systems and procedures to make sure it's profitable. So yeah, that's my do's and don'ts. Chris Corfonta, I want to franchise our business within 3 years from now. Oh, cool. Is there an annual revenue total or net profit percentage that I should be going for before even considering? We have 30 employees and a couple million per year maintenance revenue. I understand that's a loaded question. Love your videos. So if you want to franchise your business, so Chris, you're in the kind of the area we're in. I'm franchising my company. First of all, if you're wanting to franchise, it's not an easy game. I'll tell you that right off the bat. But in terms of revenue, you need a net profit margin of at least 20% for your model if you're going to franchise. That's pretty traditional, and that's what I would recommend. Yeah, so in terms of annual revenue, I'm not super, like, so we're franchising Augusta. I'm targeting a demographic that's going to actually start their business out of their garage and have very little overhead, start with solo mowing. Like, they could hire a couple people if they have the money, but it's not necessary to start the business. And the model is going to be very, very systematic, and it's going to be very much like start with one mow truck, get a very systematized route. Like, and then just scale out slowly like that using maintenance, residential maintenance. And so if you're, Chris, wanting to franchise your business down the road, I wouldn't focus so much on annual revenue. I'd focus on a business model that makes a 20% profit margin or more business. And then, yeah, like that's what I would say off the bat. And then people are going to be attracted to your business model based upon how you present it. So for example, for Augusta, someone only needs $40,000 to get started with us. Now, if they had 150, they could probably get a few employees, a couple of their trucks, and really go big from the get-go, but they could start smaller. So I wouldn't focus so much on annual revenue. I'd focus on a net profit margin, and that would be something that's marketable in terms of a franchise. Chris continues, he has another question. As your company has grown, have you been able to secure a profit for all months on a recurring basis? We're still struggling with 1 to 2 months each year because of the huge labor and material costs for spring rush. It hits the bankroll really hard temporarily. We make it back in other months and it's getting better each year, but I was curious to know if other established businesses experience this issue as well. Thanks. So first of all, a lot of landscapers experience this issue. As you grow in size in your business, that actually gets the higher highs get higher and the lower lows get lower. So the spring rush cash flow deficiency, as I call it, gets felt more and more the bigger in size you get. So last webinar in Pro Plus, we talked for about 30 minutes at the end of the webinar about cash flow and talked about all the ways to help your cash flow, and in terms of like billing sooner and raising your prices and all those different things, how to do prepayment instead of like why is it that we always require payment a month after? Why not do prepayment? Things like that that we were talking about. But Chris, there is always a certain level of seasonality in our business unless you live in certain states where it's year round. And so it's figuring out, number one, can you use contracts? Can you do other cash flow things? Can you accept credit cards? Can you charge invoice daily instead of monthly? Like so many different things. And it's gonna hit you hard if you have a seasonal business in the spring. Like I made that video recently about the spring rush and the cash flow issues that we have in our industry. And so we've done things like add pro labor services, which is like a handyman services during the winter. You're able to, if you do commercial work, do services during the winter, do tree work, whatever it is. It's like the one time that we diversify outside of our core competencies is the winter, because we're trying to keep the guys busy and we're trying to make revenue to get by. And so if you have a cash flow issue, it only gets magnified as you grow in size and revenue and employees and all of that. And so I'd really, again, focus on the foundation, focus on the core small when you're, like, figure out the business when you're small. And then as you grow, continue those same principles. Ishmael asked a question. Guys in our industry need more day-to-day lessons on running the business, like record keeping, systematizing. Wish I learned and focused on business management first rather than focusing on plant identification, all the technical things. Yeah, so that's why I have this course. That's why I have a podcast. This is why I'm doing this video right now, is to try to give you more of the business, marketing, hiring, that side of the thing, because there's so much information and good information, better information that I could ever give on plant identification, equipment maintenance, types of equipment, like all of that stuff. Like that stuff is not hard in terms of teaching. Like Ishmael said, like the lack in our industry is in the record keeping, the systematizing, all that. Some of the things I talk about on the podcast, it's very difficult to give you details, like on record keeping, for instance, because it depends on what type of software you use. It depends on your market, things like that. So sometimes I can't get really specific, but I try as much as I can. Amity Morales asks, how do you know what percentage of your revenue should go to employees? Making sure you're not on your numbers. Keep employees happy. So first of all, I would check out LMN. They are a software system, but I don't use them for software like invoicing or anything. I just use them for their budgeting. You can actually do it for free. Just do LMN software. Google it. You can do the budgeting thing for free. You can get how your numbers stack up against the industries. Like the average in our industry, according to LMN, is 26.7% of revenue goes towards paying for employees. I find that to be higher in most businesses, especially ones where the owner is trying to be out of the business on a day-to-day operational level. And it depends on the type of service and all of that sort of thing. However, what percentage of revenue should go to your employees depends on what you're doing in terms of, like, if you have a lot of material costs, that number is going to be like skewed lower. If you are doing mostly labor, that's going to be skewed higher. So it's hard to give you a percentage, but it's something that we're actually working a lot on right now in terms of numbers, because we're switching over to a pay for performance model instead of by hourly, and so this is something that we've been talking about a lot. Thomas Salazar, what steps do you take to successfully break into a saturated market? I like saturated markets because it means that there's a lot of business. If there's a ton of competition, it means there's a lot of business, supply and demand. And so I like it, and what I would say to break into a saturated, or market that is, what's the word? Yeah, saturated market. I would just make sure that you have something that's very different, and then market around that one thing. Like, what is the differentiating factor? That could literally be your logo. It could literally be the fact that you do a drug test. It could literally be the fact that you don't allow smoking in the job. It could be the fact that all your trucks are labeled. It could be the fact that all your guys are uniformed. Like, one of those things. Just take one and just market that. Just pound it. All your marketing material and all your trucks and all your website, like everything that you push is about that one differentiating factor, so that when people think about lawn care, they think about you because that one thing that's different. Clean trucks. Maybe it's pink trailers. Maybe it's all our guys are background checked and we don't smoke on your property. Like, whatever it is, one thing, not everything, not all those things I talked about. One thing, focus on it, the thing that makes you different than everyone else, and just market. And everything that you do, it should be around that one thing. Chris asks, how would you approach raising prices for recurring contract customers that are low margin? I'd say 5 to 10% of our customers each year need a price hike. I'm always worried about scaring them away by raising prices, so would like some thoughts on how you would approach that each year. I know it's not good to have low margin customers, but losing them makes our revenues go backwards, and I hate the thought of that. Thanks. So Chris, if you're in the course, go to the very bottom of the module page, templates and documents. In there is a document that we actually use, a letter that we send to our customers when we're raising prices, and less than 2% of the people who get that letter with a price increase, less than 2% cancel service. So that'd be a good starting point. But the main thing is just be honest with them. Let them know that you're not making money in their property. Let them know that they're out of your service area, whatever it is, the reason why you're raising the prices. Or just say, hey, look, we've never raised your price before. You've been a customer for 5 years. In that time, we've had to do X, Y, and Z. That could be hiring more people. Labor is so expensive now. People understand that your labor costs are rising, fuel costs are rising, insurance costs are rising. You just explain all that. You just like make them part of the family, make them part of the business decision. They are a partner in the business. Make them aware of those things, and many times they're understanding it. If you've done a great job, they like your guys. Like it's not been a big issue to raise people's prices. And if you're not raising prices, I highly encourage you to do so. Literally, if you can take an unprofitable mowing customer that you're not making any money on, and if you're charging them $30 a mow, and you're not making any money on them, and they're just like unprofitable as all get out, you give them a price increase to $40 per mow, all of a sudden you're making 33% margin. All right, or sorry, 25% margin. If you were doing the mow for $30 per cut and you're not making any money, if you move that to a $40 mow and you give them a price increase, that extra $10 is pure profit. That's 10 out of 40. That's 25% profit margin. 25% profit margin on a mowing job is really good. So you can really make an unprofitable client very profitable in terms of industry standards for profitability around mowing, which is typically more like 10 to 15%. You can really do that if you can get that letter, if you can get them convinced, and if you can make them part of the decision-making process and make them realize that in order for you to become a sustainable business and for you to be able to service their lawn in 10, 15 years and then not have to look for a new company every year, in order for that to happen, in order for you to have a sustainable business, you need to have their price go from 30 to 40. And for most people, they are understanding. Kevin asks, how do you figure out how to charge to sell a customer right out? Oh, okay, so Kevin asked this question in the Pro Plus group too, and I told him that I'd answer it here. so everyone can hear this. Because we had our last webinar is about acquiring businesses and selling your own business in Pro Plus, and so Kevin asked this question as a follow-up to that, so I told him I'd answer it here. So Kevin asked, how do you figure out how much to charge to sell a customer outright to another company? Ask because we are working on our routes and route density, and some customers we have are a little further away from our shop than we would like. So what Kevin is saying is, hey, route density is here, we have customers in the periphery, we want to sell those, we don't want to do them because they're not in our route, but yet we want to sell them in another business. So what I would say on that, it's really going to come down to who your buyer is, because you're not selling them a business, you're just selling them literally a contact information. And so I would start the bidding, and this is what I told Kevin on Pro Plus Groups Facebook, is I would start the bidding at like 8 to 10 times the revenue per service number. So if you're charging $50 per mo, I would start the bidding at like $400 to $500 to try to sell that customer. You're not going to usually get that unless someone's pretty desperate. Like it might go down to $100 per. It really depends. I would start the bidding high. I'd put together like a 1-page presentation to your competition. Make sure you tell them that you promise you'll never signing an NDA. Like they need to know that you're not just gonna sell them the customer and then you're gonna go around their back and sell the customer landscaping jobs and other type of work that's profitable. And so make a nice 1-pager, send it to your competition, tell them exactly what you're doing, tell them the price per customer or whatever it is, and see who bites basically. And honestly, I've seen customers sell for 15 times their per mo price. If you're talking about maintenance, I've seen them go for literally 1 or 2 times. And so I'm not a big fan of just buying 1 or 2 customers here and there. I would never do it as a business owner. But if you find a solo guy that is really focused on a certain area, and those are where your customers that you're trying to sell are, you might buy a few. And so this is a little bit different because we had talked about in the webinar for Pro Plus about selling your whole business, selling all your customers, or selling all your equipment separately and all that. But in this case, when you have a few outside of your service area, I would put together a 1-page presentation, send it to your local competitors, and ask for a certain amount per customer and see who bites, because I've seen it all over the map. Just so there's really no number I can give on that, but that's how I'd go about it. 1-page document, send it to your local competitors, see who bites. So hopefully I answered all your questions. I know there's probably more questions even coming in here, but I'm just gonna cut it here. And so if you haven't already, check out Landscape Business Course, the group on Facebook. That way next time I do these questions and answers, you can hop on there and ask your question on how to grow your business. So thank you all so much. Hopefully you learned something